All right, everybody, welcome in. My name is Joe, and we're going to play some chess. So I'm starting off with the e4 pawn again, going into, see if we can get into that Ruy Lopez type opening. And we have an opportunity. So now we're into it. Let's see how it goes. This is that opening that we were talking about, different variations that exist and things like that. There's tons of lines that you can study on the Ruy Lopez. I am not here to talk to you about those right now, except for I'll talk a little bit about this one. So I'm going to go into the early exchange variation. Now my opponent is going to want to take back with the queen's pawn. Now the trap here is that I cannot take with my knight. Even though I want to, it looks like a free pawn. I grab the opponent's queen, comes down here. I can do this in color. Yeah. The opponent's queen comes down here and attacks both my knight and the pawn at the same time. And from where my knight is, there's no place it can go to defend that pawn. So I end up losing a pawn with check is what ends up happening. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to defend that pawn. Now that it's defended, now we can grab the pawn. So now that pawn is available to us for taking, and my opponent successfully defends it. So we move on. I don't know what to do with the dark square bishop on the Ruy Lopez. I have not done enough studying. This comes with an attack on the queen, but my opponent easily defends it. I'm assuming they're going to push here. Before I do that, let me go ahead and push. I'll push h3. Just give myself a hidey hole if I need to retreat. The concern I have, though, is I've done this before, and I don't remember it going well. I think my bishop ends up getting just stuck doing nothing. I kind of want to bring it all the way back to d2. Oops, no, cancel. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and bring it all the way back to d2. I think this is where it usually ends up sooner or later. We've already lost one of our bishops. I'd like to hold on to the other one if I can. Just keep developing. I don't know where this knight's going to go. It might come around here. Something like that, maybe. So if I look at this particular pawn right now, my opponent has two defenders on it. I have one attacker, so I would need to get more than, I need to get a few more attackers there. Excuse me. Go ahead and rotate. I need to push a pawn in order to get my queen out. I don't know what I'm going to do with my queen for right now. All right, scanning my opponent's board from this position. His bishop could get developed there. Could get developed here. Aha. That is interesting. I'm going to go back because this square has now freed up. Notice there's no pawns. So there's no pressure along this. So my knight can sit there happily. Now that my opponent does have a knight ready to go. But now I'm forcing my opponent basically to control this square. So by simply moving my knight back here, I'm forcing my opponent to control that square. Or push past. You know what? He could push past. So let me go ahead and what this a3 pawn is doing is it's stopping my opponent from pressuring my knight this way. Okay. So this is now a very closed position. That knight is only, that pawn is only defended once. So if I could get another attacker on that, I would be really happy. So let's go ahead and go back to that plan. And see if we can get somewhere on this pawn. Since my opponent moved their bishop here, this breaks the line of sight from the rook. Excuse me. My opponent captures. I can just capture back, and that actually gives me a little hidey hole, a little a way to get my queen involved in the game somehow. So I'm scanning my opponent's board now, just trying to look for ways that what they could, what their game plan might be. There's always got to keep an eye on, grabbing an outside pawn or something like that. Are there any concerns that I might have that, this could open up lines? Right now, no. Okay. Now we've successfully got attackers here on this pawn. If my opponent pushes down, I can grab. And if they push down, I can grab. Now he's added another defender of that pawn. Okay. So now I'm just looking at basic ideas. Line my rook up with my opponent's queen. Right? Just basic ideas. I don't know what the plan is here, but that's just a basic idea. Let me go ahead and grab here. This bishop is only defended by the queen. We drive the queen away, then we might have an attack here. Also, if my opponent gives me access, let's say he captures with the queen or something, then we might be able to find a good discovery with our bishop. So I bring a second attacker, or an attacker on that pawn. I'll have a second attacker once I move this bishop out of the way. I can even bring a second attacker with my queen if I need to do that. And I can always bring my other knight up in front of my king as a defensive measure if I really wanted. And my opponent spotted that my queen could easily rotate up here. I don't have any real great attacking opportunities. So let's say I sacrifice my knight here. Queen picks up. I don't have anything great to do with this bishop to give me an attack on the queen there. So we're just going to keep that in reserve for now. Just keep scanning the board, looking for opportunities. Remember, if we play for a draw, like that means that we are equal in skill, and that's a good thing. If you look to keep the board in balance, and that's the best you can come up with, that's a good thing. All right, my opponent is probably looking at some kind of forcing a queen trade here. I don't have to go for it because my queen is defended, but it comes here and it still defends this pawn. Now, I would be okay with opening this up. It does open up this e-file, but if my opponent doesn't go for it, it gives me access to this bishop. Now I'm scanning my opponent's game plan. He could easily grab here, and then I would take back. What do I have that's undefended or insufficiently defended, right? So I'm scanning my board as well. This backwards pawn is always going to be a weakness that I probably need to shore up a little bit better. Now, having the dark square bishop means that that one's okay. This pawn here is a little weak. It's technically defended right now, so I could be looking at sticking my rook underneath it to help shore it up. Plus, that would, if this does open up, right, if we do see this exchange and this pawn starts walking, having my rook already on this file means that we get to fight for control of that file instead of just giving it to my opponent for free. These are just things we're looking at. We're scanning the board, trying to see if there's anything out there that that I might be missing, right? Is there anything that I'm missing? Is there anything that a tactic that my opponent has, like if he were to sacrifice here, does that get him anything, right? If he were to just grab this pawn, does that do anything? Because right now he's got two attackers in that pawn, and I only have one defender. So I definitely need to get another defender on this pawn. Question is how and where and what, right? So what are we going to put on this pawn to help defend it? Well, we talked about putting the rook under there, so that's definitely a possibility. So just keeping an eye out on what might be available to us, right? So what how the game is proceeding. My opponent is going into a long think here, which is fine. We've got the time. If you have the time, use the time, right? There's no reason to squander the time. Take a moment, scan your position, look for opportunities. So this was a Ruy Lopez where we went to the early exchange, right? Ruy Lopez. We went into the early exchange where I grabbed and then my opponent grabbed back with the pawn. That's something to keep an eye on. If you are black, you want your opponent to grab this pawn here because then you can bring your queen out. Now, yeah, that's what we expected. Now it moved. The nice thing is it moves that pawn off of that e file, so it's no longer a target. It does give my opponent access to that e file. One thing I could look at doing. So here's an option. I could grab the pawn here. My opponent captures with the queen, and then I capture here. That's a total possibility. Oh, this could be very good for me right here because I can grab. My opponent's only option is to grab back with the queen, leaving that bishop undefended. I am okay with that, so let's go for it. At the end of that line, he does have this pawn. Now, before I hit go, right, before I confirm, I'm just scanning to make sure I'm not missing anything, right? Where's the tactical, where's the shot, right? Where's the slamming of the door? So I just went up a full piece. I'm assuming my opponent's going to grab here. Right now I have two attackers on this pawn. My opponent has two defenders. And even if he grabs that pawn, yep, it's still attacked. Now we've got our third attacker on that pawn. Now my queen is undefended, so I definitely need to do something about that. If my opponent pushes, I'm going to drop my queen here onto d4, because what that'll do is that opens up the possibility of checkmate. My opponent will immediately have to defend against that, most likely by dropping his queen back. I guess he could drop it here. All right, so I grab with the bishop. Ah, tactic. My opponent grabs. if I grab with the rook, I drop my rook. So I grab, my opponent grabs here. I have to grab with the queen, invite the queen trade. All right, so we just grabbed a pawn. We're back evened up on the pawns. We're still up the piece. We cannot grab back with the rook. We have to grab back with the queen, but we are defended here. Now my opponent has just gone for a sacrifice. He traded his rook for my bishop on the hopes that if I took with the rook, he would have access to this. Now his queen is under attack. My queen is under attack. The good news is everything is defended so far. All right, so where do I want to put my queen? I can put my queen here, immediately attack. I could just bring my queen back to here. I could even grab this. There's nothing saying I can't grab that because this rook is defended. We'll start here. Offer the queen trade again. If my opponent dismisses it, then I'll grab here. But I'm up a full rook at this point in time. So unless I really screw up, right, this is a winning position. I just have to not blow it. We've seen what happens there before. I do not have back rank issues, right? I have an escape square for my king. So that doesn't mean I can just completely be reckless. I can grab here because it's defended. Now it's time to look at getting my rooks involved in the game. So I have an extra rook. I'd really like to get some kind of rook lift on the book. If my opponent looks for that, that's fine. I'm gonna triple up here. And then I'm gonna bring my queen over to shut this escape square down, and then I have two rooks attacking the back row. Everything is defended currently, so I'm okay. I'm probably gonna stick my queen. Oh no, not there, I won't. And at this point in time, if our opponent does not block it, I have a forced checkmate. Oh, no, I don't. Well, I can at least force my opponent's queen off the board. Capture. All right, just I pop my rook there. My opponent captures it. I capture back with check. My opponent's only legal move is to block with the queen. And then I trade off, and my opponent has nothing left. I have a queen left. Now, what could my opponent do at this point in time? He could sacrifice. I don't picture him doing that. He could push a pawn. He could bring his queen back immediately. Because he doesn't have to, I mean, then this would not come with check, right? So there's several things my opponent could do at this point in time. But there is danger in this position, obviously. There's danger for me as well, right? Like, my opponent does have this alignment. Let's see here. Does that handle anything? No, I don't think it does. That comes with check. All of these moves come with check. And that's the important thing. All of these moves come with check. Now, the only legal moves for my opponent, and I'm happy to trade that away. And then we will start by picking up his outside pawn. Now we got to figure out if I can checkmate with a rook and a queen. Go ahead and push some of these to give my king some movement. If I can stick a pawn here, Captures, captures. Unfortunately, that was a bad move on my opponent's part. That gives me access to this square. That's fine. Now we just got to get our king into the game and not stalemate. So here's where the stalemate. We have to watch for stalemates, okay? So we want to make sure that everything we do comes with check whenever possible. So we notice here, my opponent is not in stalemate because he has an escape square. So as long as he can go back and forth between these two, he's fine. Yep, he still has escape squares, so he can still move here. Just making sure I don't miss anything. So he's going to go here. I'm going to go here. He has to go here. What do I want to do? Go here. Let me just think this through. If I go check, he has to go up here. And then my queen is taking away all of these. Queen is taking away all of these. Pawn is taking away that. So he has these two he could bounce back and forth between. That's dangerous. Let's start here. That comes with check. He has to move up the board. Let's see which way he goes. All right, fine. You know, fine. We're gonna give him some escape squares so I can clear up some of this board a little bit. Sorry, I'm not great at my end games. We know this, y'all. We know this. I know there is a checkmate pattern here. I'm just trying to find it, and I don't want to stalemate. Make sure my opponent has lots of squares to go to. Can't go here, but he can go here. Now I have access to this. So that's what we needed. We needed that little breakthrough. Needed to be able to drive my opponent's king away so I could get my king closer. He has to go here or here. Here would be better for him. Yeah, because that is now this. The queen is taking away all of these squares. Queen is taking away that square. So that would be stalemate. So grabbing this way is stalemate. So we'll give him another legal move. And this will give me access to this. And that comes with check. Queen is cutting off all here. He still has this available to him. But there is no stalemate because he has a passed pawn. Forced to go here. I can go here. Cannot go this way. Yep. And then I can come here. He has to move the pawn. I hate stalemate, man. I hate it. Then we go checkmate. GG, well played to my opponent. Took long enough, but we got there. So, all right. I know that there is a checkmate pattern there faster, guys, and we'll hit that real quick. So we'll turn on the engine up here somewhere. Yeah, right about here somewhere. So I did miss it. There it is. Yeah, okay, there's one. So having the queen this close, the queen is a melee piece. The other pieces are long range pieces. Okay, so the rook, the bishops, the knights, they are ranged pieces, whereas the queen and the knights really are kind of in between. But the queen loves to be up close and personal. Even though she can range the whole board, she loves to be up close and personal. These are all cut off. These are all cut off. The only escape square would basically be the ones that are blocked by his own pawns. So we missed that checkmate. Checkmate in 5. Checkmate in 4 right here. 8 and 5. Yeah, I just didn't find it. Yeah, basically the same idea. Bring the queen here. The king has to come there. Waste a move. Force your opponent to push a pawn. Force the king. That's a defended pawn. The king can't do anything about it. Force the king off the line again. Now here, boom, because that square is covered by the pawn. Okay, that's a good series. All right, back up to where we were. So this is our game. Back to our game. Checkmate in 1 again. Okay. So that's what I missed. Why is that? Oh, right. Because king can't escape that way, and this wall is in place. So the queen has all this covered. All right, so there's another one we missed. Checkmate in 1 again. Yep, I just got to slide over. Because the queen covers the whole box around her, right? If the queen is sitting here, this whole box is blocked by her. And the king has that barrier covered. So boom, checkmate on the back. Even a rook would, no, it has to be a queen. There's a rook, the king came up that way. All right. So we did it the hard way. And notice that this is stalemate. Game over, draw. That doesn't show. This would be a stalemate. Game over, but no check. So this is a draw. Took a while, so not the cleanest, right? Not the cleanest at all, but we got there in the end. It only took us from here. Force checkmate in 26, and it took us 35 to 60. Basically 25 moves. Now, assuming everybody makes the best moves, obviously my opponent didn't make the best moves because there's checkmate in 1 that I missed. So from here, an additional 20 moves. From checkmate in 1, 20 moves. All right, so let's get that out of the way. All right, now back to the fun stuff. So this is the Ruy Lopez on the board. This is the exchange variation I talk about, and in this case, we cannot grab this pawn. As the queen comes down, the queen is attacking both the pawn and the knight. The knight has to find somewhere to retreat to. Typically here or here is really the only place you're going to go. So let's say you go right back. Queen grabs with check. Essentially what you end up doing is you could move, but realistically the better option is just to trade queens. Forces white to give up castling privileges. The material on the board is even, but white has now given up castling privileges, is kind of in the middle of the board, and black hasn't. Black has, you know, standard developing and can castle. So that's one of the things. If you're playing black, this is a great way to, if your opponent grabs this, keep this in mind. It's a great way to catch your opponents out, because if they grab this pawn, then they're not expecting the queen line. If they know about the queen line, then they're not grabbing that pawn. I played what I feel is a better variation by just defending this pawn. That can be done with the pawn or the knight. And if we turn the engine on, actually, let's turn the opening explorer on. Yeah, in fact, even castling is fine here, because nothing's attacking my pawn. And yeah, okay. But d4 immediately attacking that pawn. That's funny. That's an interesting line. Yeah, man, these 60,000 people, I don't know. I would just do this. And the knight retreats, and then you capture. Now, the danger here is that your queen is in front of your king. The king runs away, then you can defend your queen. But you really have to watch out for, let's say, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to go down it. But you are putting your queen directly in front of your king. And if your opponent somehow manages to castle, you know, then there could be an issue. No, not that. I don't know. I'm just making up moves. Right now, you've lost your queen. So you do have to be a little careful of that, but it's you saw how many crappy moves I had to make just to get that situation play. So it's not too bad in this particular Ruy Lopez opening. I went for the exchange, then I just defended that pawn. I never know what to do with this dark square bishop. This is just one way. Basically, I gave my opponent free tempo there, and I should not have done that. I should have just parked it here on d2 and called it a day, or even here on e3. Not the world's worst place to put your bishop, right? Just park it here. It's defended by the f pawn. It can give you a little bit of range down here. You know, maybe eventually, you know, look to rotate it around somewhere. I don't know. There's things you could do. Yeah, so this is very typical as well. A lot of times what you'll see is if you see same side castling, or if you see, not same side castling, if you see a balanced position and one person has a majority on one side, you might see them take their majority and attack your minority. The other thing is, I'm not saying this right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think and talk at the same time, and I'm not good at that. The other thing is, this cluster of pawns here is way away from the king. So if I'm going to attacking down the flank, down the queen side, that's definitely a strategy. Now, from this perspective, if my opponent is attacking down the queen side, I want to be controlling the center and the king side. Right? So if if my opponent is focused here, then I want to control here and here. It's an option. It's an idea. My opponent has these doubled pawns, so it's possible that they're going to use that double pawn to try to throw one away, so to speak, to basically bust open the position, right? He's got doubled pawns here, so by running this extra pawn down the board, he can bust open my position. So that's an option as well. And you'll see me do that too. When I have doubled pawns, sometimes I'll try to position that second pawn or the lead pawn. I'll try to position that pawn in a way that I can sacrifice that pawn for some other kind of advantage. Because at the end of the day, that pawn is already weaker by blocking in the pawn behind it. And I've already given up the file that pawn was on, right? So that pawn is already not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So it's a great candidate to sacrifice. And if you're going to sacrifice it, look for an advantage, right? So my opponent's queenside attack here was pretty good, right? This was another tempo loss. I should have just left my knight sitting here, knowing that my opponent was going to be pushing this pawn since he got this structure set up. I should have just left my knight here, knowing that once this pawn pushes, I could just jump right into this square. I gave it back too much tempo, and my opponent immediately saw what I was trying to do and immediately cut me off at the pass. That's fine. But I did not play this well, right? We did not play this great. There's a lot of lessons that I can learn from this game, even though technically I won the game, right? But that's not important. The outcome is not important. Whether you win or lose is not important. It's wow, that's the most cliche thing I've ever said. It's how you play the game. Like, how did I play this game? Did I play it well? No, I missed some things. Parking this knight here, I can't do that now because two attackers in that square. So I only have one defender on it. So I had to reposition that knight. And you see the journey this knight took, back and forth and back and forth. It was a lot of tempo loss. I could have done better. Now, the second time I moved it, this time that I moved it, I'm happy with. Changing gears is not a bad thing. Going in one direction, if your opponent spots what you're trying to do and they set up a defense of it, don't keep hammering away. Like, okay, we tested that flank. That flank didn't work. We're going to go to the other side. And that's what this knight's journey was. My opponent played this really well. I mean, they found everything that I was trying to do. My opponent spotted all of it. I think here maybe I should have gone dark square bishop. Yeah. Oh, even sacrifice the dark square bishop because of the fork. Because you can't take back because it's undefended. All right. So that's something that I never would have thought of on my own. So I never would have thought of this sacrifice. Completely sacrificing the bishop to put the queen in a queen fork. I'm not good enough to spot those. I'm sure as hell not good enough to spot knight forks like that. But I was thinking something along this line. The engine hates because captures, then capture here. See, now it's saying sacrifice the bishop. Oh, right. It's not a sacrifice the bishop because it's doing the same thing that I want to do. Captures here. Nope, can't do that. Here. Even then, there's not really a good attack here. So, all right. That would not have worked anyway. All right, turn that off. So continuing on, the last vestiges of this game. This move here is really what lost my opponent the game. I bet if we look at the engine, this is fine. This is fine. This move right here. Yeah, that was just... My opponent knew he needed to move his knight somewhere to get his knight involved into the game. Where it is here is fine. There's nothing wrong with it right now, but could have gotten it involved differently. But unfortunately, what my opponent didn't spot was that this is a defended square. So that's an even trade right there. Oh, shoot. I hit the wrong button. Right here. So my opponent basically took that square for nothing. I took his knight. He took my knight. Unfortunately, at the end of the line, he drops that bishop. So that's where the game changed, is right there. Major game changer. Grabbing this pawn is perfectly fine, but I'm able to get an attack in. The only thing I was thinking is what happens if my opponent pushes the rook, or pushes the pawn, because now he has two defenders on it and I only have one attacker. But this is what I was thinking because it immediately challenges that center square, so my opponent has to defend. But they could simply drop their drop the queen back, offer a queen trade, which I would have gladly taken. But unfortunately, they drop a pawn with an immediate attack on the queen. And this is what we had to spot. We had to spot this, which gives up that rook that we had just fought so hard to win, right? So we won a piece, and then my opponent was going to go for a sacrifice exchange to win a rook back. So that was a great play by my opponent. Unfortunately, I spotted it and had the queen ready. And as long as I spot that that can happen, and then my opponent just did everything they could to try to keep his queen on the board. But unfortunately just kept walking into one attack after another. Even this was not the best way to play this. Like, I have a 9-point advantage, and then it slowly whittles down to a 6-point advantage. So even this is not the greatest way to play this. Got the job done. Yeah, my opponent had to retreat there. The queen is really the only thing they can do is get the queen retreated. Push a pawn. Nope, because that hangs the rook. The rook is hanging. Didn't even see that. Didn't even see that I could just straight up grab the rook. Missed that completely. I was so focused on this, which I thought was a good plan, right? That was a good sequence of events. Either way, it ends up the exact same. It comes with check. Yeah, either way, it ends up the same, so I'm happy. I have no complaints about how we played this. And then we already did the end game analysis. So I'll go back and I'm going to look at this game. There's a few things that I know that I can do better, right? That journey with the knight, I'm not happy with it. And I'll go back and I'll review it from a flipped standpoint. So I will come here and I'll flip the board. And I'll go back to the beginning of the game and I'll do it again from my opponent's eyes. So, and I'll play the game like my opponent played and say, okay, why did he play this, right? Why did he play that? Because mostly I want to know if I can figure out what my opponent's mindset was, then maybe I can figure out how to not make the same mistakes, or how to not fall into their traps, or how to look for options. Specifically like this. Why didn't I see that this was available as soon as my opponent pushed? I waited until he pushed, and then I said, oh yeah, now it's available. That should be obvious, right? Yeah, this journey with the knight was not my greatest play. I'm not in love with it. But we got the job done. And we played some good chess. We spotted threats. We made some threats. And it all started with that basic same opening that I'm encouraging all of you guys to try. You know, a pawn, followed by your knight to f3, followed by a bishop, either the Ruy Lopez or the Italian. Take your pick, and just go from there. All right, guys, this was fun. I'll catch you next time. Bye.